Hey guys, Ethrion here from Langrisser C. I'm from the Guild Legion of Scorn, and I'm here with part 2 of the Langrisser Mobile Beginner's Guide. And we're going to just be taking a brief look into combat mechanics. I'm not going into the very detailed damage calculations and how you actually calculate exactly how much damage your units are doing. We're going to be talking about very core basic concepts regarding combat in Langrisser Mobile itself. So I think I'll first start off with the fact that there are 10 different classes in the game, and that you can see which class your hero is just by the icon here. For example, this is an assassin unit, this is an aquatic unit, this is a mage, this is a cavalry unit, this is a holy unit, so on and so forth, and this is a flyer, of course. So I start with classes because the class that your hero in determines how much they can move, it says here, as well as their attack range. Obviously, if their range is 2, they are a ranged character, and if their range is 1, they are a melee character. With a few exceptions, generally ranged characters can obviously hit melee characters and they cannot retaliate, although there are certain melee characters that are exception to this norm. That is for movement and attack range. However, for movement it gets a bit more complicated because there are different terrain types, as you can see in the upper right hand corner. When I click on the different tiles, the name changes, right? So it says grassland, wooden bridge. You can even see there's a defense bonus there. So the class that you are affects whether you can move into a particular square, as well as how many squares you can move in that direction. And to illustrate my point, I am going to show you a very handy chart I found, which helps to, there we go, which helps to show you how many points of movement you need. So movement cost basically states how many movement points it takes to move into a specific square, depending on what kind of terrain it is. So even though cavalry, for example, normally has 5 points of movement, you can see that out of that 5 points of movement, they require 3 points just to move into a water tile, which means that cavalry's movement on water is severely restricted, which is of course logical. For flyers, you see that they have no movement restrictions whatsoever because they fly, right? And for defense bonus, if your unit is on a certain tile, you will get a defense bonus to your entire unit, which means your troops as well as your hero, which can be useful, let's say, if you want to absorb certain attacks. The next part about combat I will go into is the priority system. You can actually see this diagram in the game itself, and what this means is that it's sort of like a rock, paper, scissors, where certain classes have priority over others. For example, infantry has the advantage over lancers, lancers have the advantage over cavalry, and cavalry has the advantage over infantry. For the next two classes, holy and demon, holy has the advantage over demon. Demons don't get any advantage back, unfortunately for them. And archers have an advantage over flyers, which means that if the archer hits a flyer at ranged, generally that they do a lot more damage than if someone else were to hit the flyer at ranged. Do note that if ranged units such as mages, assassins, and archers, they are all considered ranged units, holy as well. If these ranged units attack at melee range, are attacked at melee range by a melee unit, there is a penalty that's inflicted onto the ranged unit, which means that the melee unit, even though a flyer usually would be hurt severely by an archer attacking at range, if the flyer were to hit the archer in melee range, the flyer would conversely have the advantage. So there's a melee ranged advantage as well, beyond this priority system. And how much stats advantage you get? Well, I got you covered. This is the stat advantage that you get. For example, when a lancer is attacking into an infantry unit, you get minus 20% damage. However, the converse is when the infantry is attacking into a lancer, you get plus 40% damage. So you actually, the disadvantage is less if you are initiating combat. So basically this favors the person who initiates. But you can see generally it ranges from about 20 to 40%. The noteworthy exception is that when holy units are attacking demon units, they get a whopping plus 80% damage bonus. This applies not only to normal attacks but to spells as well. Sorry, not spells, skills. Skill usage also goes by this. So this is the table to note if you're talking about class priority. Now going back into the game itself, I want you to note that your unit consists of both your troop here, which is here, and your hero, which is here, and they can be of different classes. As you can see, the sorceress is a mage type troop, whereas Bozo the hero currently is a demon type hero, and you can mix and match heroes and troop types. Do note that generally your movement is limited to the more limiting troop. For example, cavalry normally can move 5, but if they were to equip zealots, which can only move 3 usually, or 4, they would only be able to move at the slower speed, because they have to follow the slower member. What's important to note is that in this game, keeping your units at full health is very important. And when a unit, I mean the combination of your hero and your troop, and this is because your troops themselves will attack as well. When you are attacking, each troop, and you have 10 of them at full health, will do 2 attacks, and the hero himself or herself will do 20 attacks. So that's a total of 20 attacks from the hero and 20 attacks from the troops. So if your troops are, for example, half your troops are missing, that results in a lot less damage when you are attacking. So for example, let me just show you this combat animation, and you can see, if you pause, that there are 10 Griffin Knights and 10 Lobsters attacking each other. And this is where you can see that the troops actually do make significant contribution to combat. So a half health unit is always of less threat than something at full health, simply because there are more troops available to attack. That is with regards to combat mechanics. Next, I'll go into basic team setups. Generally, when you are playing PvE or PvP, your team will usually consist of a tank, as the name suggests, as per MMO terminology. A tank is someone who takes attacks for your other units simply because they are more resilient. For example, my tank has 1000 defense, whereas this is my damage per second unit. DPS unit only has 600 defense. So obviously you would want a tank to take the punishment, and for the DPS units to try to pick off other DPS units. There are also healers present that can actually heal up your tank or your DPS units, and generally this is more or less your standard team composition. You have a tank, 1 or 2, you have a healer to keep everyone healthy, and you have DPS. Anyone who's ever played MMO before, this should be fairly familiar. With regards to DPS, they take various forms. They can have single attackers. For example, you saw this flyer smack into this aquatic unit. This aquatic unit was guarding for this other unit, which is why it took the hit instead. So that's the purpose of a tank, to take the hit instead of your squishies. And this is a single attack. As you can see, it says here that it attacks a single enemy. However, there are also AoE, or area of effects attacks, which you can see over here in Bozo, and he will say that it deals area of effect damage to multiple enemies within a large span. Obviously, because it affects multiple enemies, the damage dealt is less than a single target skill most of the time. You will also have to note that damage comes in 2 forms. Physical damage attacks the enemy's defense, and magical damage, which is over here, and you can see this magic damage, will attack the enemy's magic defense. Okay. Lastly, a very quick note about buffs and debuffs. Buffs are basically beneficial effects on your units, as you can see here, that will add to their stats, such as attack, intelligence, defense, magic defense. Importantly, these stat buffs do not just apply to the hero, they also apply to the troop. It's very, very important, and therefore all these buffs are actually of great significance. How do you remove buffs? You have buff strippers such as Raw here, which will say they dispel 2 enemy buffs. Right, so this is one way of getting rid of enemy buffs. Negative effects on heroes. Let me see if I can find one. Hold on. Let me just skip. Okay, there we go. So this is a negative effect on the hero. It's in red, so you know that it's a debuff. And it says that the hero cannot heal yourself. So debuffs can sometimes be very, very crucial. And how you remove debuffs is with skills that actually state that they dispel 1 debuff. So there are 2 types of dispels. There are good dispels, where they dispel debuffs of your friendly units, and the bad kind of dispels, where the dispels occur and they remove buffs, good buffs on your unit. So for example, Liana is a healer, and using her heal skill, she can dispel 1 debuff. So if she can actually remove this cannot heal yourself debuff on the hero Landius over here. In fact, her talent also mentions that she will remove debuffs from allies within 2 blocks. So this is the last facet of combat that you need to know, which is buffs and debuffs. So hopefully now you have a basic understanding of how combat works, as well as class priorities and so on and so forth. I hope this part of the beginner's guide has been helpful, useful, entertaining. As always, is Zethrion, signing off.